Greetings, fellow citizens of Disneyland. Brickey here. Today's adventure, let's look at why California doesn't want Disneyland and other theme parks to reopen. Okay, so last week was rough. I mean, it was brutal for theme park fans just want to get back inside of their favorite park, mine, of course, Disneyland. It was a brutal week because we've been waiting for state guidelines on how the parks can then begin the reopening process. Not even an opening date, but literal guidelines on what do we need to do, how do we do it, to then get an approval that we can get a reopening date. And the guidelines that have been leaked, this isn't official, but all indicators in the Magic 8 Ball are pointing to these are impossible guidelines, like really, really hard stuff for the parks to be able to pull off in order to earn their reopening dates. And one would think, why would the state of California make it so impossible for theme parks to reopen? When you give somebody a set of rules that you know they can't achieve, it's kind of a half pass of, oh yeah, well, if you just want this thing, all you have to do is this. And when this is impossible, well, there's a reason, because they don't want you to get your way. They don't want you to earn a reopening date. So therefore, there has to be a reason why California doesn't want theme parks and my beloved Disneyland to reopen. Let's explore what that could be. So when we got the news, and once again, this hasn't been officially released to us, but fellow YouTubers, different media outlets that cover the parks have shown what is believed to be California's big think tank on how to reopen parks. And a lot of it was common sense, a lower capacity. We're all prepared for that. We all know that we're going to have to play the ticket lotto to try to get admission into the park. And we're cool with that. I think many of us would just like to know that it's open. And even if we're not there today, someone else is enjoying the magic. But then limiting the park to just 120 miles, right? You have to live 120 miles from Disneyland to get into the park. That's a pretty hard thing to enforce. I mean, I know they do that with like the Southern California Select annual passes. I know there is a way to do this, but that's a pretty wild thing to require a private business to do. So that's when I started to say, okay. I can see this coming down Main Street, USA, like a parade. They don't want the park to reopen. And I want to stress this. They want everything to be open. California wants to be back to being normal. We want to be back to being the 6th largest economy in the world if we were our own country. But there is a clear reason why right now they don't want the parks to reopen. And then the last indicator that they're saying, okay, go for the impossible. Let's make sure that Orange County is in the lowest category of our 4-tier program, which currently is just impossible to get to. These are all indicators that are just clear that right now they don't want theme parks open. Governor Gavin Newsom said Wednesday he is in, quote, no hurry to reopen Disneyland and other California theme parks. We are going to be led by a health-first framework, and we're going to be stubborn about it. That's our commitment. That's our resolve. We feel there's no hurry putting out guidelines. It's very complex. These are like small cities, small communities, small towns, but we don't anticipate in the immediate term any of these larger theme parks opening until we see more stability in terms of the data. So of course, Disneyland as a corporation is angry. And of course, fans like you and I are angry. People want to get back into the magic. And neighboring cities that are teetering on total economic disasters, they're angry. And Bob Iger is so angry that he left the California Reopening Committee. When asked about Bob Iger parting ways, Gavin replied, I'm not surprised at all, and stated he was incredibly grateful for Bob Iger's support. He went on to say there's disagreements in terms of opening major theme parks. We're going to let science and data make that determination. People are mad. They wanted a more achievable way to open up the theme parks. And this made everyone angry because it literally took all of the hope out of the room. Going back 2 weeks ago, People were eager. Everybody was saying, I went down to downtown Disney and I saw that they were doing this behind the gates, and I saw this movement, and Disney's just putting all the pieces in play for a quick reopening. We were going to get a press conference that was going to tell us this is when it's happening. And everything couldn't have been further from that. So there is just a communal depression, outrage, feeling defeated. In many ways, this is a microcosm of 2020. So let's ask, why would California do something that is so unpopular? And in a press conference just Monday of this week, why would Gavin Newsom ignore a question from a member of the press about the reopening of Disneyland? Why do they just not want this to happen? Well, as someone who has been covering the reopening of the parks, and thank you so much for watching my videos and watching this one today, and subscribe to the channel to get a daily drop of Disneyland news. I'm back from my vacation and I'm hitting it hard. As someone who's been covering this reopening process, I've seen a lot of your comments. I read all of the comments. And one comment that is a through line that keeps coming up that I want to just maybe dispel a little bit. A lot of people believe that this has everything to do with the 2020 presidential election. And I'm here to tell you, I can't see any scenario in which that makes sense. Now, I respect your opinion in politics. We all have our own opinion, but I just want to break down for a moment how I see the election having nothing to do with the reopening of Disneyland. So if you could pardon me a moment to share my opinion, maybe we could reach some sort of common ground. Trump is never ever winning the state of California. He may win the city that you live in, he may win the county that you live in, he may even win the state that you live in. But I can assure you this, there is statistically no way possible that Donnie is ever going to take California. And Donnie knows this. Donnie and his buds have done literally hardly any campaigning in California since he's been president. He's only come here to look at the wall samples, to look at the fire and tell California how it's their fault that the forest is burning, and ignored science because, it's not a global warming. That's a whole other thing. I'm getting off track. But did you see how all of this ties in together? Like, Donnie doesn't care about California because he knows largely in large numbers, California doesn't care about Donnie. He is not getting our electoral votes. So there is no way that closing the park could somehow sway the election and cause Donald Trump from being reelected through the crossroads of the state of California. Like, there's just literally no way this is going to happen. For 28 years now, the state of California has always gone in a landslide with the Democratic nominee for the presidential election. So, statistically, there's just no way that not opening Disneyland could sway enough voters to make sure Trump gets reelected through California. Now, granted, there's 49 other states, so I'm told, but there's no way that Disneyland being closed can persuade California voters to go in a way that would help Donald Trump get reelected. So when people say, you watch, November 3rd, they'll reopen the parks, this is all around the election, friend, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying I can't see a path to that making any sense whatsoever. Looking at the political statistics coming out of California for the last 28 years, and even more so studying the last 4 years of voter movement, I just don't see how that's possible. And that's the number one comment I've seen. So let's just go ahead and take that one off the table, if you don't mind. We've all heard that we're going to be starting a second wave of coronavirus coming this fall. Well, congratulations. If you're watching this, you made it to fall 2020. 210,000 people didn't make it to fall. So the idea is with the fall, you get more people going indoors where the COVID can spread a lot easier. We've seen rampant spread of COVID through DC, through a couple of events where people were together side by side and unmasked. We've seen it start to now go through football. Football has had a team, the Tennessee Titans, had 20 people that tested positive. Cam Newton, the quarterback for the Patriots, tested positive, pushing a game over to a Monday. So we're seeing both in politics and entertainment and sports, we're seeing that COVID is on the growth. We've also seen that the country is flatlined. And some people would say we never really got around COVID wave 1. So we went from wave 1 into wave 1.5, and now we're going straight into COVID 2.0. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, Disneyland can be largely outdoors. outdoors, and also Southern California, because of our amazing weather, we can still do a lot of things outdoors that other states can't. Well, that's one of the reasons why I believe the 120-mile restriction was put on the reopening of Disneyland. Because someone, say in January or December, living in a community where it's very cold and everything is done indoors, making this person way more of a risk at catching COVID-19, coming out to California, asymptomatic, going through the temperature reading, no problem, still asymptomatic, going into the park and spreading. I believe that the fall and COVID wave 2 has everything to do with the 120-mile restriction. Trying to say, well, if we do this, we only want to bring people that are still living in the bubble that is Southern California. Therefore, having citizens of Disneyland that we can control as citizens of California. And the second wave of COVID also has a lot to do with not only indoors, but this is influenza season. For the first time, we're really going to have COVID coexisting with flu, with pneumonia and other respiratory diseases that really seem to spread once again in the fall, in the winter, when people go back to sheltering indoors. Or the other tier of this, outside of the public health, is that mentally people are over social distancing. People are over COVID-19. I wear a mask every time I go out, but I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of the social distancing. I'm so sick of living this new normal of the pandemic, and many people are even more fed up than I am. So I think there's also an idea of the sickness is going to get worse and people's fatigue is going to get greater. It's a real dangerous 1-2 punch. Even those of us that are being completely logic, we're over it. We're done. We're Americans. We have very, very small attention spans. That's why we like going to Disneyland, because something amazing is happening every 5 minutes. So when you take the health factors and the overall public just boredom and fatigue, if California said right now, today we're reopening, today we can reopen the parks, Disney would then go, okay, give us 3 to 6 weeks because we got to go talk to our employees. We got to call a lot of non-union employees and see if they're ready to come back. And we also have to go renegotiate with our unions. So it's not like they can just get the park pristine and ready to go and flip the switch in 7 days. We're talking about a huge labor force before the layoffs, maybe still now, I don't know. The number one employer in Orange County. We're talking about a huge workforce that's right now just kind of existing in the abyss of the pandemic. These folks have to be called. They have to see who's available. They have to bring them in. They have to retrain. They have to work on the new protocols. Like, this is a slow moving ship. So therefore, if California were to say right now, today, you can reopen your park, they're basically trying to predict, but where will the park in the world be 6 weeks from now? Give or take. I don't know that that's a solid number. The mayor of Anaheim said 6 weeks to reopen. It seems pretty safe. I've talked to cast members that said, really, if they pushed it, they might be able to do it in 3 weeks. But it seems as if right now you would be predicting where we're at a month and a half from now. And friends, if you saw the news at all last week, it's hard to predict where we're at 5 days at a time, much less 30 or 40 days from now. So that literally comes down to a responsibility that the government has, the state of California's government. How much are you willing to bet on the health of citizens? Now, betting on Disney is a safe bet. They're such a hugely responsible corporation. The way that they have handled Walt Disney World in Florida and the international parks has been outstanding. This is a company that their brand is based on guest satisfaction, guest happiness, and guest safety. I think betting on Disney is a really, really safe bet. But betting on the world and betting on coronavirus, that's a pretty wild gamble. And when you combine that saying yes today is really saying yes for sometime in late November, early December, no one knows what the world looks like then. So it's easier to brush it off. Because what really we're asking the state of California to do is to take a bet, to take a gamble on public health, public safety. And look, I love Disneyland. You know that I do. But for pleasure, right? Like, Disneyland is escapism. It's amazing. It's the American dream materialized for many of us. But at the core of its root, it's pleasure. It's an escape. It is not something that, even though it feels essential to my heart, my brain knows that it is a pleasure to live 13 miles from the park, and in the old days, to get to go once a week. And also, it's easy to look at this from a fan's perspective because we're all huge fans, but what about from a cast member perspective? It's one thing to say, I'm willing to gamble public health for 6 weeks to now for me to go to the park once a week or once a month, however it works in the future. But what about the cast members that have to be there 40 plus hours, 5 days a week? It's one thing for you and I to be willing to go there once every so often. It's another thing to expect somebody to be around large crowds like that 5, 6 days in a row. That's a whole different scenario than how it affects us as the guests. And with such a huge workforce, that's a lot of people to be willing to gamble their health. So if they said yes today, they're saying yes to mid-November or December. So let's try to look at what that part of 2020 could look like. No one knows how coronavirus is going to cross over and do a collab with flu season. Some folks believe that we could be looking at something that resembles a civil war because of how the election is already being contested by the incumbent president, saying that it's not legit and legal, and not once has Donnie said that he would participate in a peaceful transfer of power. I mean, I don't like to get political, but it's really hard not to look at politics and where America's headed and also combine that with the common sense of reopening theme parks. Like, politically, we may be through some of our darkest days from November 3rd to January 20th. Like, nobody really knows what that's going to look like. Obviously, everyone's hoping for peace, but the magic 8 ball once again is looking for destruction. So it is my opinion, as someone who is responsible for the citizens of California, that Gavin and his buds are really saying, if we can just free roll and kind of escape the end of 2020 and look at where California and America and coronavirus is at in January or February, when politics are over, whether it's Donnie who's the president or Joe who's the president, the politics are done. Now you're just doing the job. And hopefully, and sometime in January, we can come up with more of a national strategy. Hopefully we'll be closer to a vaccine that most of the population is excited to do. I've read the comments. I know a lot of you don't believe in vaccines. You don't think that that will help whatsoever. But let's just pretend that 60% or more people believe that it will help out and that it is going to be here. I just really think what they are trying to do is just buy themselves time to get to a moment where we can see what the future holds. Because saying yes today is really saying yes to the future. And right now we live in, arguably, wherever you're at politically, these are the most uncertain times I think any of us as Americans have ever lived through. So I believe that ultimately it is fear. They're too scared to say yes because they don't know what the future holds. Scared to have people traveling from all around the country to get back to precious Disneyland. Scared to have people from communities that are maybe running a little bit wild coming down to the park. And scared to have a place that really offers peace and tranquility and escapism to all crossroads of America. Like, this is a weird video to make because a lot of you politically are high-fiving me and a lot of you politically hate me and right now are not watching the rest of the video and you're giving me a hate comment. We're living in divisive times and they're scared to have a place of every different demo and a place of every different geographical destination to come together. Disneyland is a crossroads of America, and I believe that these very strict reopening guidelines were designed to put a halt on that crossroads for the moment, for the time being, until they can feel safer about this. So they're scared to say yes, and they're scared to give an indication of when it could reopen. And I also think most importantly, they're very scared to say yes and then to have to say no again. Don't forget, never forget, we were told back in June that the park would reopen on July 17th for the 65th anniversary. And then we were told, no, that can't happen. I believe another one of those false restarts would just be so horrible, both mentally, economically, like every way you look at it. Another false restart would just be disastrous. So I really believe that they're saying, let's just hold on to this, sort of viewed as the last sector of the economy until we know where we are at as a state, as a nation. So the guidelines are impossible by purpose because they don't want the park to reopen because they're trying to buy time. Going back to football, the last 2 minutes of the game is all about clock management. This is literally the state of California trying to burn the other team's timeouts so they can just hold onto the ball and ride the clock out with a very, very minimal lead that they have. So how will this shape out? I believe that they're going to weather the storm and we will hear about a Disneyland reopening in early spring. I've been seeing this for months now. I've gotten a lot of hatred for it, but I really think that if they didn't get open in October or November, why would you even try to gamble it in the midst of all the chaos? If they've staggered it out this far, they're going to keep on riding that delay, and I believe we will be looking at something in early spring. I do believe, though, that California realizes the damage that they've done to Disneyland. I believe that California is very excited to have Disneyland as one of its citizens, to have it as one of its, economic mainstays. And I believe that the tax credits and the benefits that are coming Disney's way in 2021 will be significant. It will be a way that will help Disney get to a profitable position way faster. And I believe they will try to do whatever they can to say, look, we owe you one, we're going to make it up to you, and we understand that you need a strong economic recovery. How can we help? And we've seen how economic recoveries in the entertainment industry help massive stadiums get built, help massive entertainment complexes come together. Like, there is a way that state and city government works with these private entities to make strong financial recovery. And I believe that Disney has a major IOU coming from California. I also believe that when the park reopens, the demand will be huge. Whatever the limited capacity is, it will be pegged each and every day. Fans will be there willing to buy all the treats that they've been missing, willing to buy all the merchandise that they can grab. Like, the demand is going to be huge. Combine that with tax incentives. I do believe that Disneyland, once they can finally reopen the gates, the money's going to flow. And I also believe that no one will ever once again take a trip to Disneyland for granted. And if you're, a once a year person or once every 2 year person that watches these videos from outside of the state, like, how could you take Disneyland for granted? We did. When you can go once a week, when it's always there, it's human nature to take things for granted. No one is going to take this for granted for years to come. So I do believe that even though we're in the midst of the darkest days, the future will be bright for the park. It will be bright for the economic recovery of Disneyland. And I think this is all strategical to just say, let's just be patient. Let's just wait until it feels right, until it feels safe to fully reopen and to fully embrace live entertainment in a space like Disneyland again. So right or wrong, Florida is a whole other animal. Reading your comments, I know many of you always look at Florida as an example of how things went well. California and Florida, it's just two different states, two different mentalities. So is fear-based leadership correct? I don't know. I don't know if being too fearful to do anything is the right way to lead. That is a question mark that only the future can answer. And also a question that will be hard to answer because we don't know what would have happened if Disneyland would have reopened on July 17th. I do know a few days after the original reopening date of July 17th that California had one of its biggest COVID days ever. So we'll never know what the other alternative will be. We'll only have to judge this fear-based leadership. So the other way is to hell with it. Is to hell with it the proper way to lead, the proper way to guide? Are you willing to gamble? I mean, I know me personally, and this is a hard thing to do, but if I was in the mindset of the governor, as much as I want the park to reopen, I would probably be in a similar mindset of like, this is not essential. It could potentially be a risk for public safety. And I think if I was a governor, my whole goal would be to keep my constituents as safe as possible. So if I put on my governor Imagineering hat, I can see where he's coming from. I can at least have empathy. And I would encourage you to do the same because right now, only time will tell which park, which state, which governor got it right. And in the meantime, as fans, we just have to wait. We just have to wait, we have to have patience, and we have to enjoy the fact that in 2020, we at least have communities like YouTube, Slack, Instagram, podcast. We have so many different ways of fans to stay united, to stay together, and to keep Disney's magic alive. I know as long as there's imagination left, Disneyland will never be finished, but I've pivoted during the pandemic with saying, as long as there's imagination left, Disneyland will never be closed because it's always open in our imaginations and in our hearts. So it's going to be a while, but I will be here giving a weekly breakdown on reopening updates, news and rumors, and you can catch all that by subscribing to the channel. And please, while you're there, drop a big thumbs up on the video and leave a comment. That helps for more people to find my little tiny Disneyland channel. But what I try to do is I try to take the news and I try to break it down in a common sense approach. I try to take my emotions as a fan and put them on the shelf and really look at the math, look at the data and say, why is this happening? What can we learn from this? And what should our expectations of true believers of the magic be? And thank you for commenting. Even if you feel different than me, I really do read all the comments and I try to learn about other people's perspectives and I try to make content to help people see where those perspectives may be angled, how they may be skewed, and how as a Disney community, we can kind of just all get on the same page of patience and understanding. I'll see you here tomorrow. Until the next time, I see you at Disneyland. Thank you for watching.